Oh my goodness.
Birthday. Where's the birthday music?
Oh, is that
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Sound test 1, 2, 3.
Loud and clear, Tata Mzwanele.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Honorable members, I welcome all members who have logged in to the virtual mini-plenary session. There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament and constitute a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in a virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb the attention of other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone, and where connectivity permits, connect your video. Members may use the icons on the bar at the bottom of the screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her own hand to raise point of orders. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary point of orders or interjections. Lastly, honorable members, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini-plenary session, and therefore, any decisions will be taken in full plenary session of the Assembly. The first item on the order paper, which is a subject of discussion in the name of Honorable D.T. George, on the desperately needed relief measures, including expanding the zero-VAT-rated food basket, that the government should take immediately to alleviate the negative impact of the inflating cost of living crisis on South African households. I now call upon the Honorable D.T. George.
Thank you, Chairperson. In his medium-term budget policy statement, the Minister set out our country's dire financial situation, a direct result of the ANC government's ineffective economic policy choices. Our economy is significantly underperforming the 3.3% growth projected for the sub-Saharan African region. National Treasury projected 0.9% growth in February, revised it down to 0.8%, and the Reserve Bank projects 0.7%. This stagnant growth has resulted in a revenue shortfall, a widening deficit, and expenditure has been cut. This dismal state of affairs was entirely avoidable. Government chose to place itself at the center of our economy in pursuit of a so-called developmental state that would drive economic growth, generate jobs, and lift South Africans out of poverty. The dysfunctional and corrupt ANC government has proven to be incapable of implementing this model. Nothing highlights government incompetence and corruption more than the fiasco of the state-owned enterprises. After 1994, a fatal decision was taken to corporatize them. This meant that they would employ boards and function like other companies, but would still be owned by government. This was a giant mistake. Although boards were put in place and paid very lucrative salaries and bonuses, the deployed cadres had no incentive to be efficient. One after the other they failed, and government's response was to bail them out. Hundreds of billions of rands later, we still do not have viable state-owned enterprises, and we never will. Government chose to implement its cadre deployment program that employed politically connected individuals to key positions in the public service. This means that the best candidate is not selected, and the occupant doesn't do their job without fear, favor, or prejudice. Instead, politics infects service delivery, and the job is not done to serve the people, but rather to serve the party. That is why we have an oversupply of millionaire managers in the public sector and an undersupply of people who can actually deliver the service. This is not sustainable, as the public sector wage bill continues to spiral upward without any improvement to service delivery and productivity. Government chose the wrong model for Black economic empowerment. The model was sold as a mechanism for broad-based Black economic empowerment, but it was exact opposite. The model made a few people extremely rich and left everyone else behind in poverty. Battling South African households are feeling the pain of these poor policy choices. As the world grapples with inflation, government can take action to relieve the pressure by taxing fuel. The price of petrol increases, that increases transportation costs, and then knocks onto the cost of food. And more South African households are unable to put enough food on their tables. In the week before his statement, the DA handed a memorandum to the minister asking him to respond to the cost of living crisis, where 81% of households are skipping at least one meal a day. 12 million people go to bed hungry every night. 30% of children under the age of 5 are stunted in their development, and millions of hungry school children are unable to concentrate and learn. South Africans are struggling to pay their mortgages, their school fees, and cannot maintain the lifestyle they've worked so hard to achieve. Government has simply not responded to this growing crisis. There has been no mention of the action plan that Cabinet mandated the economic cluster to develop to enhance food security and accessibility. The DA has proposed measures to bring much-needed relief to battling South African households. Government can cut the taxes and levies on fuel that currently comprise 33% of the fuel price. This would immediately lower the cost of fuel and the cost of transportation and the cost of food. Government can implement the very long overdue pension fund reform that will enable members to access a portion of their funds during financial hardships prior to retirement, as has been successfully implemented in a number of other countries. Government can increase the child grant to the poverty line. Government can increase the zero-VAT-rated basket of goods purchased by the most vulnerable 50% of South African households by including additional items such as bone-in chicken, beef, tinned beans, wheat flour, margarine, peanut butter, tea, coffee, baby food, and soup powder. Battling South African households will be able to put more nutrition onto their tables. Government also needs to clarify the future of the social relief of distress grant. This was extended as an afterthought without any policy clarity and no effective funding plan. There is no sign of the revised social security plan promised several years ago. All we have to be concerned about is government now talking about tax increases. Simply put, government needs to respond. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next speaker will be the Honorable the Deputy Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. At this stage, we will not want to respond to all the points that Honorable George made, including on cadre deployment, BE, because that will divert us from the topic of today. We can go to towns in showing how the DA cadre deployment works, and secondly, how the continuous attempt and attack on BE is actually a code and a cover to protect colonially accumulated privileges. But the intention of BE is to make sure that the majority of people, particularly black and poor, are included in the economy. But that's a subject for another day. The government does recognize that South Africans face challenges in this difficult economic climate. And indeed, the cost of living is too high. But we do not think that additional VAT zero rating of several food items is the best instrument to address the problem of high cost of living. And before I state the reasons why we do not think that this is not the right solution, let me state the obvious, which is that VAT constitutes 26% on average of gross tax revenue. It is this tax revenue that we collect, that we redistribute to the poor via different pro-poor government programs. And let me remind honorable members that the government spent more than 60% of its budget on the social wage, which is largely directed to the poor. In addition to this, government has already VAT zero rated a number of basic food. This includes the zero rating of illuminating, paraffin, and other items, which was introduced in April 2001. And studies subsequently showed that suppliers did not pass on the benefit of the VAT relief to consumers as it was intended. So it doesn't follow that zero rating will lead to lower prices. Studies have shown that. The tax revenue that is lost from zero rated food items mostly flow to higher income households, because this category of our people purchase more of the products that are zero rated. In fact, many analysts have demonstrated that in absolute monetary terms, middle and higher income households benefit more from the zero rating than lower income or poor households. Products that are zero rated are well targeted. Further zero rating will lead to VAT revenue loss, which could be directed to the already existing pro-poor government programs. Targeted cash transfer to the poor is better and more redistributive as opposed to VAT, which benefit mostly high-income households. In 2029-2020 fiscal year, 31 billion VAT revenue was forgone due to zero-rated items. So we think that further zero rating will lead to the decline of revenue which could be used to support the poor. Honorable Chair, it is our considered view that the current VAT system is well intended and essential in generating the necessary tax revenue to fund the government expenditure programs, including initiatives to help the poor. And as I said, a social transfer system of assisting the poor through targeted expenditure intervention is much more desirable and better. And recognizing that zero rating is not the best instrument, government has instead implemented a number of policies to directly benefit lower income households through the expenditure side. Education and health budgets are progressive. An extensive grant system of old age grants, the child support grant, and the disability grant provide cash to households who are most in need. The social relief of distress grant, popularly known as 350, is another new mechanism that government has used to provide this relief. This is a better approach than zero rating, where so much of the benefit go to higher earners and where companies may not even pass on the benefits to the consumers. Government has recognized that prices have risen considerably in the last few years and have put in place other mechanisms and measures to alleviate this burden. Last year, we implemented a temporary reduction in general fuel levy. This provided relief of an estimated 10.5 billion rands. On top of that, the general fuel levy for the past two budgets has not increased the fuel levy. Another measure that was announced earlier this year in the budget was the introduction of a road accident fund levy for food manufacturers. This means these manufacturers using diesel can apply for additional tax reduction on diesel used. This could possibly reduce the cost of food manufacturers and alleviate the pressures on food prices. This shows that government has been active in finding solutions to try and combat high prices without resorting to further zero rating. The focus, Honorable Chair, is on driving structural reforms on our economy, bringing competition in energy industry through the structural reforms that we've undertaken should bring prices of energy down. Bringing competition in the rail and port system should bring competition, thus lowering the prices in the industry. This will not only increase growth and the potential for more revenue and higher social expenditure, but it will also lead to less pressure on prices if logistics and energy become more efficient and more reliable. The ultimate goal is to increase growth and create more jobs where households will have higher incomes and be less dependent on the state and be able to withstand all the temporary shocks to prices. I thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. The Honorable Masango.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. One doesn't have to look far to find the devastating impact of the crippling cost of living crisis in South Africa. According to the Eastern Cape Provincial Office of the South African Human Rights Commission's August 2022 inquiry into child malnutrition and the right to food, child malnutrition in the Eastern Cape should be declared a disaster in terms of the Disaster Management Act, and government should intervene immediately and decisively. As part of this urgent and chilling call, the inquiry affirms the repeated calls by the Democratic Alliance for the Department of Social Development to increase the child support grant above the poverty line. The DA supports the South African Human Rights Commission's call for the Department of Social Development and Home Affairs to collaborate on a registration campaign targeting unregistered children. Chairperson, these calls should not come out of reports by the South African Human Rights Commission because they are at the center of the department's core mandate. If the department is not doing the above, what is the department doing? Chairperson, as far back as 2016 and beyond, the Democratic Alliance has been calling for demonstrable reforms to avoid the crisis we are now experiencing as a country. A country like South Africa, which my colleague, Dr. Dion George, referred to recently as a rich country with a government that is mismanaging its resources, should not have 81% of its households skipping at least one meal a day, 27% of children stunted in their development, or millions of hungry children going to school, not being able to concentrate and learn. These children are our future. This government should invest in them to be the best that they can be. Chairperson, researchers and economists agree with the Democratic Alliance that the social cost of ignoring this crisis will far outweigh the cost of intervening to bring relief. It should be clear to everyone that although some interventions will cost the fiscus directly, the indirect costs in terms of productivity losses, learning losses, the cost of dealing with diet-related diseases will cost South Africa more. It beggars belief why the ANC government has simply ignored our thoroughly researched, implementable, and tangible solutions. The hunger crisis is deepening, it is urgent, and it is ravaging to the most poor and vulnerable, leaving a trail of devastation throughout the country, especially in the remote rural areas. The ANC government has neither considered our solutions nor come up with its own. The lack of caring and a diminishing political will has become the ANC's hallmarks. COVID-19, drought, and other unpreventable disasters that the country went through made the resulting challenges, such as unemployment and homelessness, worse. But these have not been matched by a sense of urgency in coming up with tangible and implementable reforms from the side of the ANC government. In the wake of COVID-19, governments around the world responded swiftly with bold relief packages because they know it is in everyone's best interest, not the ANC government. Honorable Chairperson, the right to food and life is enshrined in South Africa's constitution. The DA will not let up until South Africa's hunger crisis is addressed. This is because the DA cares and we have solutions. South Africans can look forward to their interests being prioritized in 2024 when the DA governs this country with care, respect, honor, and dignity. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next speaker will be Honorable Mani.
Thank you, Chairperson. House Chairperson, South Africa's economic crisis is a product of a political incompetence, mismanagement, and looting of natural resources and corruption under the government of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa in the past 5 years. It has indeed been 5 years of rampant corruption. It has been 5 years of nepotism and friendship arrangements. This period has also seen a significant increase in unemployment rates and a decline in the quality of public services, exacerbating the suffering of our people. And it has been 5 years of stuffing US dollars in sofas and mattresses, while our people are suffering high levels of inflation and high cost of living. Our people cannot afford to put food on the table. Many cannot afford transport to work. There are workers who are losing their homes, and their families are left without roof over their heads. The unemployment crisis, particularly among the youth, is reaching alarming levels, further straining the already struggling households. The reality is that our people are desperate, and the Deputy Minister must be in touch with the ground. His comments negate all of this. When VAT was increased from 14% to 15% in 2018, we were told, or perhaps lied to, that the working class and the poor will be shielded from the impact of this increase. Sorry, Chairperson, this thing is messing around here. Will be shielded from the impact of this increase. We're even told that an increase will be reviewed, but such was never done. Moreover, the promises of job creation and economic growth have fallen flat, leaving millions in a state of financial uncertainty and distress. But we now know that the only people who receive relief from National Treasury are the rich and the wealthy. It is the people with money who want to install new and used solar PVs that are getting the relief. House Chairperson, any relief measures that do not start with the immediate suspension of austerity measures, if not stopped, will push this country into an economic depression, like nothing we've seen before. You cannot provide any relief to the most vulnerable, then go and cut the budget for their health and education. Cut the budget that must provide them with functioning police stations, funding schools, clinics, municipality services, and many of the basic services that are affected by austerity measures. The current fiscal policies favor the affluent, widening the gap between the rich and the poor, and perpetuating inequality. It is irrational, senseless, and reactionary. As the EFF, we have called for an increase in all social grants. We must increase the child support grant from 510 to 1,020. We must increase the foster care grant from 1,130 to 2,260. And we must double all other social grants to protect the most vulnerable. Yes, indeed, all this is possible. The EFF is on record calling for the rejuvenation and growth of the economy through large-scale industrialization and an education system that prioritizes technical skills. We must introduce a grant for all unemployed graduates. We must review and reduce the VAT back to 14%, remove all the lies we've been told, and then we can look at expanding the zero-rated food basket. We must increase subsidies for buses to make public transport affordable. We must review the fuel levy as a matter of urgency with the intention to reduce it with immediate effect and stop these excuses of blaming international world on fuel price. We must reintroduce subsidies for farmers and rebuild all food markets to make food much more affordable. And this can also be extended to all the farms that have been restituted. House Chairperson, these short to medium-term solutions to the inflating cost of living. Additionally, we advocate for stronger regulations against monopolistic practices in key sectors to promote fair competition and lower prices for consumers. We need to invest in sustainable energy sources to reduce our dependence on expensive imported fuel. In the long term, we must grow the economy and redistribute wealth to the majority of our people. Towards closure, the need for a comprehensive security system that protects the unemployed, the elderly, and the disabled is more urgent than ever. We know that the ANC does not have the capacity to grow the economy. The EFF is going to win the elections in 2024 and will implement all these relief measures. It is only the EFF government that will protect the vulnerable poor and the working class. It is only the EFF government that does not make promises but makes commitments. So the EFF government is committing to the people of South Africa that in 2024 they must do the right thing, remove the ANC because it continues to help the colonials in this country. They continue to push the reform agenda that is colonial inclined. They continue with their neoliberal policies. We must remove them and put in the government that relates to the people, the EFF government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable Inkosi E.M. Buthelezi.
House Chairperson, let me then rather take it on his behalf, if you would allow me.
Carry on.
He's having connection issues. Thank you very much, Honourable House Chairperson. Honourable House Chairperson, we thank the DA for tabling this debate, and the IFP is in support of expanding the zero-VAT-rated food basket, as food is a basic necessity that no South African, regardless of their socioeconomic circumstances, should have to go without. However, Chairperson, today we are once again scratching the surface of a much deeper and widespread challenge. It is therefore unfortunate that the subject for discussion takes a one-dimensional view of the circumstances faced by those who are destitute in our society. Therefore, I want to cut right to the core of the elephant that we cannot leave unaddressed in this room. The reason behind the need to expand the list of zero-rated food items is the economic chaos and disarray that the uncaring and greedy ANC-led government has plunged our country into. Youth and those willing and able to work are faced with a staggering unemployment rate. Mafia-style criminal networks and organized crime syndicates are bleeding our country dry, as their activities amount to a loss of 155 billion rand each year, and the ANC-led government is doing nothing about it. Systems of corruption are so deeply entrenched in the inner workings of most government departments and its entities, leaving South Africans without basic services, such as water and electricity. Expanding the list of zero-rated food items will not help with these problems at hand, because the destitute people still do not have money to buy these items. It is the responsibility of the government to create employment opportunities for those who are impoverished to earn an income so that they too can buy food. South Africans do not want to be pitied. They want to be empowered. And they can only be empowered if we rid this country of the corrupt leaders and officials and systems that are preventing the creation of new and innovative employment opportunities. The ANC-led government has created a culture of cycle and dependency, Chairperson, in this broken economy, which has also always been at the expense of the majority of the poor South Africans. Under their leadership, those that are rich have become richer. They continue to grow their wealth, while those that are poor have lost the very little that they've got. Therefore, Chairperson, as much as we support this debate, the fact of the matter is that this ANC-led government has created a situation where the majority of South Africans cannot put food on their tables. It is therefore the IFP's hope and conviction that come 2024, that South Africans will use this opportunity to change their government, to bring about the much needed change in their socio-economic circumstances so that we can uplift the vulnerable in our society. The IFP stands ready to empower the poor, stands ready to empower the marginalized, and we, Chairperson, will put South Africans first. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The Honorable Vessels.
Thank you, House Chairperson. House Chair, it's very interesting that the Honorable Deputy Minister Masondo is all of a sudden completely against expanding the zero-rated food basket. Because last night, the ANC accepted and approved a report in Parliament, in the House, that recommends that such basket must be expanded. So he must maybe read the documents in front of him, and he must maybe tell us, is he speaking on behalf of himself, on behalf of National Treasury, or on behalf of the ANC? And the ANC members must maybe tell us what the stance then is of the ANC after accepting a report that recommends such. The Deputy Minister comes here and says that they are completely against such. But let me also thank the Honourable George for this subject for discussion, which is extremely important. And Chairperson, it's also astounding that the Honourable Masondo says that South Africans are experiencing challenges. That's an understatement of the reality. South Africans are experiencing a crisis. South Africans are suffering. The poor are getting poorer. The expanded unemployment rate is more than 40%. More than 40% of South Africans are unemployed. It is estimated, House Chairperson, that 50% of South Africans will be food insecure by the year 2025. That is in less than 2 years. And that is why short-term measures are needed, not only to provide relief to the cost of living crisis experienced by poor households, but to also stimulate economic growth. The Honourable Masondo's arguments are completely wrong, because saying that middle and higher income households will benefit the most from such expansion, and to say that that is a barrier to do it, is completely ill-thought. Chairperson, if middle and higher income households have more disposable income because of more zero-rated VAT items, there's more money spent on the income, on the economy, in the economy. That leads to economic growth, and that will also lead to higher tax revenue, because zero-rated items form part of the value chain. So it's on the one hand providing relief to poorer households, and on the other hand actually expanding the value chain, which will lead ultimately to higher revenue income. But the Honourable Deputy Minister is also wrong to say that if there's less VAT revenue, it will be detrimental to pro-poor projects. Because, Chairperson, currently tax revenue is misused, and this government is not pro-poor. We need a caring government that has policies that are there to expand the economy, because in the long term, the only way to get people out of poverty and to solve this crisis is by ensuring sustained economic growth. Black economic empowerment has failed. It's a fact. People are suffering. And it's also a fact that ANC policies will not solve the economic crisis. We need a new government with policies that will work. And the only way to rebuild the South African economy and to restore the dignity of South Africans is to get rid of the ANC government in 2024. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The UDM, ATM, Honourable de Villiers.
Baie dankie, voorsitter. Voorsitter, dit is vir my kommerwekkend hoe gereeld stygende lewenskostes 'n algemene gesprekpunt geraak het rondom Suid-Afrikaanse tafels. Van gesprekke rondom die drastiese verhoging van vleis, melk, eiers en ander belangrike kos tot die groot kommer van huis- en motorpaaiemente wat besig is om deur die dak te styg, terwyl krag en petrol ook net duurder raak. Voorsitter, terwyl inflasie besig is om net te vererger, waarsku en praat die DA al vir meer as 'n jaar van die dreigende ontwikkeling van 'n lewensonkoste krisis. Ons het baie klem gelê op hoe lae inkomste broodwinners en families drasties geraak word. En my kollega eerbare Masango het mooi uiteengesit watter groot maatskaplike krisis besig is om te ontvou vir die armste dele van ons samelewing. Maar voorsitter, dit is ook belangrik om te begin beklemtoon dat stygende lewensonkoste nie meer slegs 'n krisis vir lae-inkomste families is nie, maar 'n baie groter en breër probleem is wat amper elke huishouding in Suid-Afrika affekteer en nou veral die middelklas. Voorsitter, in die huidige ekonomie raak dit al hoe moeiliker vir 'n middelklas familie om die huis se somme te maak klop. Mense sukkel om kos op die tafel te sit en dit is nie slegs lae-inkomste families nie. Suid-Afrikaners het groot skuld en tesame met rentekoerse wat amper met 5% verhoog het in die laaste 2 jaar alleen, skat die South African Reward Association se navorsing dat Suid-Afrikaanse families 73% van hulle huishoudelike inkomste spandeer op die afbetaling van skuld. Prakties beteken dit dat soos rentekoerse opgaan, raak dit net meer onmoontlik vir middelklasfamilies om hulle motor- en huisfinansiering, hulle kredietkaarte en hulle winkelrekeninge te betaal. En dit is voor hulle nog moet byhou met die stygende onkoste van kos op die tafel sit, sowel as die aankoop van elektrisiteit en petrol. Voorsitter, om te illustreer dat ek nie net probeer dramaties wees nie, kom ons maak die somme. 'n Tipiese Suid-Afrikaner met 'n huislening van R1.5 miljoen, motorfinansiering van R300.000 en 'n persoonlike lening of 'n uitstaande rekening van R50.000, betaal vandag 'n konservatief geskatte R5.500 meer as 2 jaar gelede, November 2021. So wat beteken dit? Dit beteken dat die individu amper R9.000 meer 'n maand of R106.000 'n jaar meer moet verdien as 2 jaar terug, net om by te hou, net om te kan bybly met die verhogings in hulle skuldbetalings. Voorsitter, omdat die DA omgee, sit ons al vir meer as 'n jaar oplossings op die tafel. Ons het voorgestel en geïllustreer hoe petrol en dieselkostes afgebring kan word met amper 30% as die regering al die onnodige belasting wat daarop gehef word afhaal, veral die krippelpadongelukkefonds. Ons het voorgestel dat daar sekere belangrike kositems vrygestel moet word van BTW, soos hoender, beesvleis, blikkies bone, meel, grondboontjiebotter, tee, koffie, babakos en soppoeier. Voorsitter, hierdie voorstelle is afgeskiet en in party gevalle afgelag. Dit is simptomaties van 'n ANC-regering wat so verwyder die daaglikse uitdagings wat Suid-Afrikaanse broodwinners moet oorkom, dat hulle net eenvoudig nie omgee nie. En voorsitter, ek verwys na die onderminister, eerbare Dr. Masondo, sy aanmerkings vroeër, dat die DA se BTW-voorstel 'n slegte idee is, want middelinkomste huishoudings gaan die meeste daarby baat. So, dit is hoe min die ANC omgee oor die middelklas, dat selfs al gaan die DA voorstel almal help, die BTW-voorstel, vir al die armste in die land, is dit nou 'n slegte idee, omdat dit blykbaar die middelklas die meeste gaan baat. As dit nie 'n voorbeeld is van hoe verwyderd die ANC van Suid-Afrikaners is nie, en hoe min hulle belangstel om mense se lewens te verbeter, dan weet ek nie eintlik wat 'n ander voorbeeld mense hoef te gaan soek nie. As die ANC omgegee het, was die DA se voorstelle maklik om te implementeer, want dit sal mense help. En daarom, voorsitter, is ons opgewonde oor 2024 se verkiesing. Want voorsitter, dit is die geleentheid vir Suid-Afrikaners om te stem vir 'n party wat nie net werklike oplossings het nie, maar wat ook werklik omgee. 'n Stem vir die DA in 2024 is 'n stem vir laer lewensonkoste. Dis 'n stem vir meer werk en is 'n stem vir 'n beter lewe in 'n Suid-Afrika wat werk. Kom ons red Suid-Afrika. Dankie, voorsitter.
Baie dankie. The next speaker will be Honorable Nkomo. The Honorable Ngoma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, House Chairperson. And greeting to honorable members on the platform. House Chair, since the ANC took over government in 1994, we promised our people that we will improve their living conditions by amongst things ensuring that they have access to basic services, including housing, clean water, sanitation, education, and electricity. In 2022 census report from Statistics South Africa has factually demonstrated in no uncertain terms that indeed South Africa is a better place than it was in 1994. To illustrate the point, the number of people who have decent houses were 65.1% in 1996. This has increased to 85.5%. The proportion of households using electricity as the main source of energy for lighting increased significantly from 58.1% in 1996 to 94.7% in 2022, which is 82.4% of households in the country had access to piped water, either inside their dwelling or inside their yard. Anyone who slighted suggests that the ANC has not increased a better life for the poor, for the people of this country would be dishonest. House Chair, the fact tells us that the old, the young, the disabled, and the unemployed are taken care of by the ANC-led government every month. Despite fiscal constraint, we deliver services to our people to enable them to navigate the increasing cost of living that affect all of us. Some of us may undermine this intervention, but they make a huge difference to more than 18 million people in this country. Roughly 7.8 million people led by the SDR grant, and around 60% of government's budget is spent on social wage to combat poverty, hunger, to protect the most vulnerable and those affected by the rising cost of living. Notwithstanding the intervention, this does not mean that our economy is not faced with structural constraint, that stifle transformation. The high level of inefficient form of concentration in the economy is a serious stumbling block that needs to be addressed and treated with necessary urgency. The Competition Commission House Chair has played an important role in combating instances of cartel product by the dominant firms, which include the collusion between competitors and unjustified inflation of prices and the abuse of market power by firms that have large market share. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the Competition Commission has acted against firms who inflated the price of goods at the expense of South Africans. In 2020, this scam was fined 1.2 million for excessive pricing of face masks. In excess of 14 million was collected from various companies due to excessive pricing and abuse of dominance cases. Who can forget the 1.9 million fine that Competition Commission imposed on the bread cartel for colluding to inflate the price of bread, which included companies like Sasco and Pioneer Foods. All these fines find themselves back to the National Reserve Fund and are used to fund other programs to support small businesses and social spending on education, healthcare, and others. We are raising this point to demonstrate that addressing the cost of living is not as simplistic and one-dimensional as the DA wants to project it. There are many layers to it, and it requires multiple-pronged approach. At the center of addressing the persisting problem of cost of living is structurally transforming our economy. House Chair, it should be noted that the main underlying driver of inflation in South Africa is external, namely the increase in fuel and food prices due to the war in Ukraine. Not only did oil and gas prices shoot up sharply following the invasion, the agricultural crops such as wheat also felt the impact. This is all due to the Ukraine being sixth largest exporter of wheat in the world. With the war in Ukraine, wheat production and crops from Ukraine has dropped significantly. We need to strengthen our resistance to such unpredictable global shocks to reduce South Africa's vulnerability. Honorable members, time for political posturing to gain political mileage will not move our country forward. Instead, we need to work together to better the lives of our people. It is during these tough times that we need national consensus in order to reset our economy and take the country back to upward trajectory. While we cannot as yet substitute oil import, we can most certainly encourage our farmers to plant more. House Chair, this is why government has provided support and encouraged communities to plant their own vegetable gardens to feed their families. Many of these initiatives have already thriving and form the backbone of not only the survival, but also healthy living for many households. The ANC uses land reform policy to broaden ownership of the economy by increasing participation with the agricultural sector, thus contributing to the eradication of the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. In the last 3 years, about 170,254 hectares of land acquired under government proactive and land acquisition strategy has been released as part of the land distribution program. About 81,501 hectares of land were allocated to women, with 444,216 hectares allocated to youth and 489 hectares allocated to people with disabilities. We need to increase access to land to create a fertile environment for local emerging farmers. We further need to ensure that land under communal tenure is used productively and used for food production. Agriculture remains an important sector in our economy, with a great potential to create the much-needed job opportunities. In the first half of 2023, the sector grew by 7.8% and created 61,000 jobs, making it the fastest growing sector. This growth signifies that the importance and influence of the sector in our country's economy. The sector contributes about 2.5% to the gross domestic product. Although this is minimal, we are witnessing growth in the sector as part of economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Through the various social compact government has entered into with the private sector, in partnership with Shoprite retail stores, active investment are being made with businesses by enhancing food security at the community and household level through the gardening program, which benefits 61,834 people and providing 1.1 million nutritionally balanced meals to children in the early childhood development and soup kitchens, amongst others. ANC-led government through the Department of Agriculture has also entered into partnership with the Japan International Cooperative Agency to provide training to improve the marketing skills of smallholder producers through the Smallholder Horticulture Empowerment Program. One of the critical measures that government employed in mitigating against the high cost of living is the promotion of community and household food gardens. The department has over time created over 3,500 food gardens with close to 64,000 household profiles. Through the climate-resistant agricultural program, government is able to provide various skills and training opportunities in household food gardening, financial management training, and community-based planning and training in indigenous seed production. We acknowledge that a lot more needs to be done to address challenges within the agricultural sector. For instance, one persisting challenge is that funding framework in the country does not appear to be geared to emerging farmers and caters more existing commercial farmers. The competitive landscape in the sector is thus in imbalance, as emerging farmers above have to overcome structural, regulatory, and behavioral barriers. In order to compete effectively to overcome this, we need to better coordinate the funding between our DFIs, commercial banks, and government. In conclusion, House Chair, we are very resilient as a nation, and we do not give up in the face of adversity. Whatever challenge we face as a country, our people are able to unite and confront them. It is on this account that we join President in calling for a social compact within agricultural sector that will ensure that it flourishes and job opportunities are created. We will continue to intensify our efforts to reduce hunger, a crisis which requires a collaborative effort across all stakeholders: agriculture, manufacturing, retailer, government, and non-government institutions. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Good. NFP. Cope. The Honorable Mabileta.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC regards the subject for discussion with great importance. It is unfortunate that the political party that is the sponsor of the discussion has very little experience mastering the subject matter. As we speak, the city of Cape Town is being litigated against for going outside the parameters of what NERSA said in terms of an electricity increase, and the city has imposed an additional 2% on the people of the metro of Cape Town, making it the most expensive electricity in the country. Yet they have the audacity to talk about the cost of living crisis when they themselves are responsible by enforcing additional administrative pricing on the citizens of Cape Town. The ANC government has long introduced legislative and regulatory measures that provide relief for the indigent, the working class, and the middle strata of our country through a host of threshold-determined support measures. When the ANC government expanded the zero-VAT-rated food basket of foods, we were criticized by the same DA that we are creating a fiscally unsustainable situation and driving up debt levels. As the ANC, we were focused on the plight of our people while the DA was trying to tell us that we cannot manage a budget. Suddenly today, we are supposed to believe that they have transformed themselves and become the advocate of the poor. Let us correct the misleading media campaign of the DA and Mr. George. In an interview with ENCA, he says that the Standing Committee of Finance has backed the DA position on expanding the zero-VAT-rated basket of food. Yesterday, in the National Assembly, when the ANC chairperson of the Finance Committee tabled their report, which was approved by the House, the DA objected to the report. They did not approve the report. And that means that part of the report which speaks to expanding the basket of zero-VAT-rated foods, they objected to. Today, they bring us this debate. Opportunistically, Mr. George, in the ENCA interview states, we as the committee supported the DA on the expanded zero-VAT-rated foodstuff. We did nothing of the sort. Our moving to adopt the report was on the basis of a long-standing position that the ANC has held when we incrementally pushed for an increase in the basket of foodstuffs to be covered, and which is what it is today. Let us be clear, the 10 additional items that the DA want to add to the zero-VAT-rated basket of foodstuffs has everything to do with election politicking. Why did they not support the ANC when stating as far back as 2012/13, we drove a move to reform the tax system, which included a range of other measures, including expanding zero-VAT-rated foodstuffs. At the same time, the ANC drove a review of the social security system in a move towards comprehensive social security, which today we have a white paper which holistically addresses a support net for the poor. It is the most comprehensive support net amongst developing countries in the world. The ANC is the party through its government that brought about the indigent program of support by municipalities for families who are in a state of destitution. A remarkable successful program weakened by municipalities not updating their registers. So, to want to claim an easy victory because of the work of the Finance Committee on a report that DA objected to lacks an integrity, Mr. George. Where is the sheer opportunism of telling the media that next week on Tuesday, when the Finance Committee deals with the rates and monetary amounts and amendments of revenue law bill, the minister has the opportunity to increase the zero-VAT-rated basket of foodstuff. He goes on to say that the minister will not do it because he is opposed to it and backs up this claim by saying they marched to the minister's office and got no response. Any consideration of a change to zero-VAT rating on food requires a financial analysis and its impact on the revenue of the fiscus. He dismisses this by saying, you can do it right now, there will be no pressure on the fiscus, and provides no factual evidence for his claim. Ask any economics in such a statement makes sense. It does not. As the ANC, we support the expansion of the zero-VAT-rated basket of foodstuff, but it has to go through a financial analysis process so that the implications are understood before any implementation. The legislation is before Parliament now for consideration, and the first opportunity that the minister will have is in the February 2024 budget. Nothing stops him from approaching the chair of the Finance Committee and asking for a meeting with the minister to discuss the matter. He says the minister refused to convene a panel on the matter. Let the minister speak for himself. We don't want to hear stories from their election program. Our proposal, which shape the Davis Tax Commission recommendations to the Minister of Finance and Cabinet, remain the framework within which any discussion must take place. What remains central are the needs of those who are struggling under the cost of living, and we must therefore tackle monopoly pricing tendencies in the private sector, corruption in the private sector as the state does not manufacture food and deal with administrative pricing. Progressive state reforms, infrastructure investment, a strong anti-corruption strategy, creating growth and jobs is the methodology of the ANC government in dealing with the cost of living. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next and last speaker on this subject will be Honorable D.T. George.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you to the participants in the debate. It's a very important matter when South African households are battling to put enough food on the table, and many of our people are going hungry as a reality of starvation is spreading. Under these circumstances, government must respond. In a country such as ours that is actually a rich country, nobody should be starving. And that requires government to make the right economic policy choices. Government has positioned its current choices as a zero-sum game. As revenue shrinks, it must cut expenditure, and then it isn't able to make the hard policy choices that are required. It needs to change the model for state-owned enterprises. It needs to cut the bloated public sector wage bill, and it needs to scrap the cadre deployment that has hollowed out the public service and institutions vital to our democracy. What government is not focused on is the actual solution to this problem, economic growth. If our economy grows, it can generate the revenue required to effectively fund service delivery, generate the jobs that will lift communities out of poverty, and fund a viable social security net to support the most vulnerable South Africans. It is possible in the immediate term to provide relief to battling households. All that is required is for government to care enough to act. Government has not responded to the cost of living crisis because it is out of touch and simply doesn't care about the most vulnerable South Africans and hard-working South Africans who are battling to pay their mortgages, their school fees, and maintain the lifestyle they've worked so hard to achieve. Government can respond immediately to cut the tax and levies on fuel, expand the zero-VAT-rated basket of food, increase the child grant to the poverty level, and fund the extension of the social security grant, the social relief of distress grant. We have noted that the Standing Committee on Finance has endorsed the DA's position on zero-VAT rating more food items. That what needs to be clarified is whether this will result in actual amendments or whether this is merely election lip service. We also need clarity on whether VAT on other items will be increased. The DA will not support any increases next year. South African households are already battling enough. Honourable Masonda, the time for talking is over. The people want action. The fact is that South Africans are going hungry, and all you have to offer is excuses. You clearly don't care about the people, nor have you read the committee recommendations, as Honourable Wessels points out, where ANC members support the expansion of the zero-VAT-rated basket because they want action too. Your economic policy is clearly garbled. Honourable Mabiletsa, you have misled the House. We rejected the report because it sets out the ANC's failed economic policies. We always have supported an expanded zero-VAT rated food basket, and we welcome your support of our position. We will speak more on this into the future, absolutely, before February. We all agree that we have a cost of living crisis in South Africa and that government must act to relieve the pressure on battling households. It just needs to care enough to be moved to action. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, that concludes the debate. We shall now proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable B S Yabo on climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies to conserve water and minimize the impact of natural disasters on the provision of basic services. I will now call the Honorable B S Yabo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Chairperson, according to the Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative, South Africa is ranked 95th out of 185 countries that are susceptible to climate change. It is predicted that South Africa is under threat of being struck by extreme weather events such as floods and droughts, which will have a negative impact on water security and social infrastructure. Greenpeace affirms our country's crisis by asserting that 80% of South Africa's land area is classed as semi-arid to arid, with just 18% classified as dry subhumid to subhumid. One of the biggest contributors to extreme weather patterns is the El Niño Southern Oscillation, also shortened as ENSO, which alternates between the El Niño and La Niña cycles, creating dry and rainy periods, respectively. More and more research must be funded and conducted to gain deeper insight into ENSO in order to mitigate against extreme weather conditions brought about by the natural phenomenon. These climate changes are also said to be rooted in high emissions of greenhouse gases, alongside the reduction of rainfall and rising temperature levels, which lead to lower water levels in sources such as dams and rivers. Chairperson, the residents of Cape Town will recall all too well the first-hand effects of such consequences during the drought of 2018, when the city's water supply was severely under pressure, resulting in taps being shut down, forcing residents to rely on alternative water sources. Nelson Mandela Bay was also about to run out of water in 2022 when the dams had a 3% water volume. During this period, we also witnessed how a lack of a consistent water supply exacerbates socioeconomic challenges and widens the inequality gap through worsened existing vulnerabilities such as poverty, malnutrition, and poor health. This is because climate change disproportionately affects the poor and vulnerable through limited response and adaptability capacity, reduced productivity, and employment prospects, which creates an unstable environment that further deteriorates their precarious economic standing. Chairperson, in addition, decreased water availability has an impact on people's health and hygiene, particularly in disadvantaged communities where access to clean water may already be constrained. This is because floods worsen service delivery and seriously harm as well as raise the risk of waterborne illnesses. Furthermore, one of the pressing challenges of water scarcity is its effect on food security, particularly in the wake of the increased population by 19.8% from 2011 to 2022, according to the National Census of 2022. This is especially troublesome, as a large portion of agriculture is rain-reliant and greatly dependent on steady water supplies. The effect of this, therefore, results in strained agricultural output, leading to higher food prices, increased import demands, negatively affecting our GDP. As noted, the effects of climate change are far-reaching and even extend to our social infrastructure. For example, the effectiveness of our hospitals and schools is dependent on a reliable supply of safe water. Lack of water security affects the quality of treatment patients receive and their recovery. It impacts the hygiene of our schools and may result in forced school closures, which is disruptive to the education of learners. Climate change also increases the risk of natural disasters, which have a multitude of effects, including displacing people and increasing the likelihood of disease outbreaks. Again, we are all too familiar with these effects, as evidenced during the KZN floods, which resulted in over 400 fatalities, with more than 12,000 houses destroyed and more than 40,000 people displaced. During such catastrophes, people are displaced as a result of losing their homes and being forced to relocate, often to temporary shelters with minimal services. These effects can also have long-term psychological effects on the victims, such as stress and trauma. As we witnessed, Floods, like other natural disasters induced by climate change, have a significant and varied social and economic impact on our public infrastructure, such as buildings, roads, bridges, and utilities like water and electricity. For instance, when roads and communication lines are damaged, it isolates communities and makes it difficult for them to access assistance and critical services such as hospitals, emergency responders, and food markets. Therefore, these consequences have a trickle effect on the development of the country and the government's ability to deliver services to its people. In turn, this also has huge financial implications, as resources need to be allocated towards social assistance, recovery, and reconstruction efforts. The ANC government has been improving the disaster management system over the years. However, to minimize the impact of natural disasters as a result of climate change on social infrastructure, more innovative, resilient, cost-effective, and cutting-edge construction materials and methods need to be employed post-haste. Climate change is not unique to South Africa, but it is a global crisis which requires collaborative efforts to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and encourage water conservation and recycling, as well as the adoption and implementation of more environmentally friendly policies and practices, such as investing in renewable energy and preserving and restoring natural ecosystems, which play a vital role in mitigating climate change impact. As the African National Congress, we recognize that the realization of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous country cannot be achieved without a profound appreciation and preservation of the world we live in and its natural resources. Combating climate change is a critical component of our development agenda because its effects pose serious risks in reversing the democratic gains achieved in improving the lives of our people in a variety of areas, including housing, health, education, water and sanitation, and many areas of development. We need to deepen disaster risk management measures and disaster financial instruments through disaster insurance to ensure the availability of funds to respond to the impact of natural disasters. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Yabo. The next speaker is Honorable Bryant, and I apologize if I got the surname pronunciation wrong.
Thank you very much. Last year, the City of Cape Town, run by the Democratic Alliance, was recognized by the Carbon Disclosure Project as one of only 2 cities in Africa to have shown climate leadership. This has been achieved largely by investing in and maintaining existing infrastructure and embracing the value of the private sector. The City of Cape Town generates additional energy from a large hydroelectric plant, which has been well maintained by the DA government, and this reduces the impact of blackouts on residents of the city. These initiatives have led to a marked rise in semigration by South Africans from other cities to Cape Town. And this increase in semigration is also because the DA-led Cape Town is creating far more jobs than any other city in South Africa. In fact, over 200,000 new jobs in the past year alone. Climate change has created intermittent rainfall patterns across the country, and more people and businesses are being severely affected by drought. South Africa is heavily reliant on rainfall, and apart from the DA-led Western Cape, none of the other provinces seem to be doing anything about it. The ANC can point to all the problems, but the reality is that their governments are unable to follow through on delivery. It's very likely that this negligence and lack of forward planning from ANC-led provinces will lead to more severe water shortages in the near future. It doesn't have to be this way, though. In 2017, Cape Town was faced with a severe drought crisis. This 1 in a 400-year drought made international headlines, with many critics expecting the city to run out of water. But instead of sitting back and accepting its fate, the DA-led administration got to work, implementing a series of mitigation and adaptation strategies geared towards preventing the so-called day zero and simultaneously building resilience into the system. This led to the development of the first of its kind resilience strategy, which has garnered international acclaim. Crucially, our successive DA governments have ensured that the City of Cape Town administration has not been hollowed out by ANC cadre deployment in the same way as so many ANC-led municipalities have been. This meant that during the drought crisis, the City of Cape Town had at its disposal a team of experienced and dedicated officials who worked day and night to achieve its goals. The DA-led City of Cape Town used a combination of sustained public communications and innovative engineering solutions to address the crisis. We brought in professionals from business and academia to provide guidance and set up a high-quality task team to assist. Because of the high levels of expertise that were retained and many years of quality maintenance of infrastructure, Cape Town was able to accurately measure its daily drinking water production as well as its dam levels. And this helped the DA-led administration to target water usage for each resident per day to help us make the water that was available last for longer. Along with exploring new water sources and a sustained communications campaign, the city expanded its pressure management technology and has been able to reduce leaks and bursts and drive down consumption. Under Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis, the City of Cape Town continues to invest in water-saving technologies and is investing in improving the Potsdam water treatment facility to improve the quality of treated sewage being released into the ocean. These steps are in stark contrast to other parts of the country under ANC control. Earlier this year, a question from the DA exposed that approximately 77% of all sewage being released via coastal marine outfalls is coming from the ANC-governed province of KwaZulu-Natal, and the majority of this is being released into sensitive estuaries. In the ANC-led eThekwini municipality, a whopping 75% of the 27 sewage treatment plants are unable to treat effluent to minimum standards. Damaged sewage pipes often take months to fix, and in the process discharge rivers of raw waste into environmentally sensitive areas. This has raised concerns regarding the overall quality of water at many Durban beaches, particularly over the holiday seasons. The terrible and unprecedented floods that impacted KZN caused severe damage, but more should have been done to prevent the scale of the devastation, and the local municipality should have ensured that drainage infrastructure was properly maintained and planning regulations complied with in high-risk areas. A considerable amount of the infrastructure that was damaged during the floods has still not been repaired. I personally visited areas in Phoenix last year where literal rivers of putrid raw sewage were running out of broken pipes into the river system right next to residents' homes. This is sadly the case across South Africa, where the ANC is in government. Residents of KZN and other ANC-controlled provinces know that the ANC simply does not care about them, and they'll be making this known in the elections next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Paulson.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Chair, firstly, me just address Honorable Yabo. Honorable Yabo, the climate crisis and its impact are no longer just threats. It's real and it is here. Chairperson, water and climate change are inextricably linked. Extreme weather events are making water more scarce, more unpredictable, and more polluted. Climate change also leads to an increase in extreme weather conditions and natural disasters. Awareness, education, preparedness, and prediction and warning systems can reduce the disruptive impacts of a natural disaster on communities. Mitigation measures such as adoption of more environmentally sensitive zoning, land use practices, and building codes are needed to prevent or reduce actual damage from hazards. Availing land through land expropriation without compensation for human settlements in more conducive locations, thereby avoiding development in landslide-prone and flood-prone areas through planning and zoning, will reduce the loss of life and damage to property and natural resources. Climate change also impacts the entire water cycle, threatening sustainable development, biodiversity, and people's access to water and sanitation. The average rainfall for South Africa is around 450 millimeters per year, which is well below the world average of about 860 millimeters per year. As policymakers, Chairperson, we must put water at the heart of our climate action plans. Sustainable water management would help us adapt to climate change by building resilience, protecting health, and saving lives. It also mitigates climate change itself by protecting ecosystems and reducing carbon emissions from water and sanitation, transportation, and treatment. The bulk of our water use is driven by economic uses of water and socioeconomic standards of living. In addition to quantity and quality requirements, greater assurance of supply are also required as our dependence on the availability of water increases. Due to the economic benefit gained from the use of water in activities such as agriculture, mining, and industry, the requirements for a secure supply of water are increasingly stringent. South Africa's main source of water is retention dams and rivers from where water is released to serve our various needs. Water is transferred from dams to a water treatment plant to ensure that the water is safe for human consumption. Raw domestic wastewater is hazardous and must be treated before being released back into rivers or the ocean in order to prevent any negative impact on public health and safety. Treatment of wastewater is critical for public health and safety because it aims to reduce suspended solids, nutrients such as nitrates and phosphates, biodegradable organics, and pathogenic bacteria. The first Green Drop public report since 2013 reveals an alarming and unacceptable state of wastewater treatment works in the country. 334 wastewater treatment works, 39% out of 955 systems are classified as critical. This is due to weak management, a lack of competent and experienced technical staff. Poor quality effluent is being discharged into the environment. The more polluted the water sources are, the more expensive and difficult it is to treat the water for human consumption. But more importantly is the danger it presents to public health. The city of Cape Town pumps up to 39 million litres of essentially raw sewage out to sea daily via marine protected areas in Camps Bay and Hout Bay. Beachgoers in Cape Town are treated to islands of floating sewage, along with used sanitary pads, tampons, and condoms. We should not overlook the huge loss of water due to the neglect of our water supply system. Jobs in the maintenance of our water supply, water preservation, and recycling will form part of the EFF government's 1 million climate jobs program, and voters should ensure that they are registered to vote for an EFF government on the 18th and 19th of November this weekend to ensure that we put in place a government capable of addressing the huge malaise that has beset our public service. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Paulson. The next speaker is Honorable Singh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies to conserve water and minimize the impact of natural disasters on the provision of essential services, particularly in our rural areas, are of the utmost importance to our nation. Such mitigatory strategies will directly and positively affect our present and future generations. Chairperson, like many other countries, South Africa is grappling with the adverse effects of climate change. Our rural areas, which are already vulnerable due to various socioeconomic factors, always bear the brunt of these challenges. Climate change can already be linked to increased frequencies of extreme weather events, such as the large-scale flooding which we have seen in KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape, irregular rainfall patterns, prolonged droughts, and sudden storms. These phenomena, which are becoming a part of our daily lives, severely impact the availability and accessibility of water and pose an additional challenge in providing basic services, especially in our rural communities. Chair, we have to focus on mitigation and adaptation strategies to address these challenges effectively. Regarding mitigation, reducing greenhouse gases towards net zero must be prioritized. This will involve adopting sustainable practices and justly transitioning to a clean and renewable energy future. Renewable energy sources must be explored and not just given lip service, and the government must invest in innovative renewable energy supply in partnership with the private sector. The energy supply grid must be opened and the legislative space deregulated so that private enterprises can assist with national energy supply deficits and innovation into energy-efficient technologies. A low-carbon economy will enable us to reduce our carbon footprint and mitigate the effects of climate change on water resources and essential services. However, Chairperson, mitigation alone is only one part of a tandem solution. Adaptation strategies are equally important, especially in our rural areas with high vulnerabilities. Now, Honorable Chairperson, when we come to the consequences of natural disaster, I think government must take collective responsibility for the consequences of some of these disasters, whether they are floods or wind or whatever other kind of damage. Because I want to put forth the proposition that a lot of work can be done by government and the authorities, especially local government, when relocating people or allowing people to build homes in informal settlements. Now, we know that urbanization is a phenomenon that is here to stay. We know that we'll never be able to provide adequate housing, and hence you have sprawling informal settlements because people move into the cities to get jobs. Now, in many of instances where disasters have taken place, and we find that even there are loss of lives, you find that these homes are built in floodplains, or they are built in areas with very loose soil, as we saw in Ananda. And in that area, Honorable Chairperson, there are still bodies that have not been recovered as homes were washed away down the hills into the rivers. Now, I think we need careful planning in this regard, and local government must be able to take a step when people begin to start occupying an area to ascertain whether that area is in the short term suitable for any kind of structures to be erected. And we need to identify areas where these homes can be built, albeit on a temporary measure, before government can provide a proper housing. Climate change poses a significant threat to our areas and the provision of basic services, and mitigation are essential to conserve water and minimize. The government really needs to be mindful of the challenges of implementing strategies, and we really need to do more, and I think we can do more to prevent some of these consequences of natural disasters. I thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. The next speaker will be the Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I would ask the permission not to show my video due to signal issues.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Climate change is one of the central problems facing the new generation growing up now. It may have been speculated about whether it's real or not, but it is indeed upon us. One of the questions is the human responsibility for this phenomenon. And although I don't have a lot of doubt about it, there are many people and a growing number of people asking whether that is really the case. However, if I understand the topic of this debate correctly, it's not about climate change and energy and all the different causes for the phenomenon, but what we are going to do regarding water. Now, if we look at the nature of water, there's just a fixed amount of water, and it could be either in the fluid form or it could be in the gaseous form in the atmosphere. If we could choose, we want the right amount of water at the right place at the right time. But that very seldomly works like that, especially in a country like South Africa with a very variable weather pattern over the long term, where we either have too much or too little water. Now, surface water has a characteristic of moving very fast, and to make quite a lot of damage if it doesn't move upon waterways, which are generally used for water, like rivers, dams, natural lakes, and so forth. Ondergrondse water aan die ander kant beweeg geweldig stadig en dit word skoon soos wat dit voortbeweeg. Dit is eintlik baie belangrik om water so vinnig as moontlik onder die grond in te kry, en daarom dat elke grondgebruiker, of dit nou privaat of regering of maatskappye is, behoort die slagspreuk te hê, geen water vloei van my grond af wanneer dit reën nie. Daarvoor maak 'n mens liewerster dammetjies, walletjies, as wat jy kanale maak Jy probeer die water terughou en in die grond indwing liewerster as om dit weg te lei. In digbeboude gebiede met baie plaveisel, baie teerpaaie, baie geboue, mag dit selfs nodig wees om boorgate te boor op strategiese plekke om water juis in die grond in te dwing, liewerster as om dit weg te vat waar 'n mens dan vratsvloed toestande het met 'n geweldige hoeveelheid water wat oor 'n kort tydjie wegvloei en dan is dit eintlik verlore vir die mensdom van daar af en belangriker as vir die mensdom ook vir die hele ekologie. As 'n mens dan op daai manier kyk na water, dat jy sê hoe lank kan jy water hou, hoeveel kan jy dit in die grond laat ingaan, liewerster as om dit weg te laat loop, dan dink jy ook anders oor riviere en waterbane wat in stedelike gebiede is. Pleks daarvan om riviere en spruite te wil betonkanale maak en kikoejoe rondom te plant met skadubome wat uitheems is en ook baie water gebruik, probeer jy juist die natuurlike waterbane bewaar, die natuurlike oewers en die natuurlike plantegroei bewaar, omdat dit, buiten dat dit ekologies die beste is, ook die beste beskerming vir mense bied wat in die omgewing woon. As 'n mens kyk na plaveisel wat soms nodig is, dan moet 'n mens juist probeer om nie aaneenlopende plaveisel te hê nie, maar juist gebroke plaveisel wat water deurlaat. Dan in groter gebiede kan 'n mens ook sê dat liewerster as om water bo-gronds in damme vas te keer, waar dit verdamp, wil jy dit in die grond indwing. Wat ons nodig het, is 'n heeltemal 'n nuwe manier om te dink oor water. Ons wil nie van water ontslaa raak soos lande met baie reënval nie. Ons wil dit juis bewaar. Baie dankie.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. The Minister.
Good afternoon, Honourable House Chair. I request permission to keep my video off because I'm struggling with signal where I am.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Honourable House Chair, honourable members, climate change is the defining crisis of our time, a challenge that will determine whether our nation continues to prosper or falls victim to inaction and the effects of extreme weather events brought about by global warming. Over the last few years, our continent has been subjected to prolonged periods of drought in some areas, whilst others have been ravaged by extreme weather events such as cyclones and flash flooding. Here at home, we have recently had to deal with mass flooding in the Western Cape and wildfires that have led to destruction of infrastructure and loss of life in Northwest Province. The 2022 report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reiterated that global warming and the associated impacts will have far-reaching negative impacts for the African continent across various socio-economic sectors. These include agriculture and food security, water and energy security, tourism, economic growth, and infrastructure development. Closer to home, as many members have said during this debate, South Africa has always been a water-scarce country and is thus especially vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Bearing in mind our vulnerabilities to the effects of climate change as a developing nation, we need to evaluate the most sustainable development pathways available to us that also consider our inherent risks as we transition to a lower carbon future. Key to this is envisaging how we will manage precious resources, such as our already scarce water resource. The Climate Change Bill, which was recently adopted by this House, will form the legislative foundation of South Africa's climate change adaptation and mitigation response strategies. Being cognizant of our government structure, the bill makes provision for the provincial and local spheres of government to conduct climate change needs and response assessments in order to tailor their respective responses to the specific challenges they face. What this means in practice is that a municipality in an area susceptible to drought and dependent on tourism revenue will have to develop and implement climate change response implementation plans into their existing planning instruments and policies. This would differ from the adaptation approach needed in a municipality dependent on agriculture that suffers from sporadic flash flooding. In this vein, in 2020, the department developed the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy to provide overall guidance to all stakeholders in undertaking climate change adaptation planning. Technical support was provided to sectors to develop and implement tools to undertake climate change risk and vulnerability assessments and design associated interventions. The following sectors have also been supported, namely tourism, human settlements, agriculture, water, mining, health, and biodiversity. Especially important is the work the department has done with key partners to ensure the coordination and implementation of early warning system infrastructure and climate information systems for communities. An example of the collaboration between national government and municipalities has been the work that we did with the Garden Route municipality following the devastating fires that occurred a few years ago in the Knysna area. The Garden Route is an area famed for its natural beauty and dependent on tourism, but it is also susceptible to extreme weather events such as fires, storm surges, and flooding. Apart from tourism, the area's economy relies on agriculture and forestry, two sectors especially vulnerable to climate change. We've worked with this municipality to develop projects aimed at building climate change resilience that will be integrated into the municipality's development planning. And this includes building early warning fire detection and wildfire management into existing climate change adaptation programs. These efforts will contribute to lessening the impacts of wildfires, particularly the damage that they create for infrastructure and the loss of life. The impacts of climate change on the tourism sector and its associated value chains will be potentially devastating for the Garden Route economy, and hence collaboration with the Department of Tourism. We have supported the development of a climate change risk and vulnerability assessment report for the Garden Route. In all, we've worked with 44 district municipalities to develop their climate response strategies, and we are now reworking the response strategies of all 9 provinces so that they are up to date and are mainstreamed into the planning framework. Work such as developing local climate change strategies is essential in incorporating climate change mitigation and adaptation in development plans. On a broader level, we will have to catalyze all sectors of our economy and society to adapt to climate change. And what this means is mainstreaming climate change into our sector strategies while simultaneously meeting our broader development objective. A typical example is green buildings that are energy and resource efficient and environmentally responsible. Green buildings offer an opportunity to save energy, reduce waste, cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, conserve natural resources while at the same time improving water and air quality. Green building practices can have a significant impact on combating climate change and help to create truly sustainable communities. There are many changes needed to mitigate the negative effects of climate change and climate-proof our economy. Apart from the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy and the Climate Bill, government has a number of tools and policies at its disposal. These include the Green Transport Strategy, the Low Emissions Development Strategy, the Industry Master Plans for Renewable Energy, New Energy Vehicles, and the steel sector. In order to implement the change necessary for South Africa to transition to a low emission and climate resilient economy, we will need international support and finance for such a process. Honourable members will be aware of the Just Energy Transition Partnership signed in 2021 between South Africa and a number of international partners. International financing pledges of $11.5 billion have been made to help South Africa's just transition and meet the country's climate change mitigation targets. Additional global pledges have been made towards the JET programs within the last year, and these include welcome additions from Denmark and the Netherlands. At the end of this month, I will be attending the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties, known as COP28, in the United Arab Emirates. At these talks, South Africa will continue to call for reform of the global financial architecture to fund the adaptation and mitigation efforts of developing countries, as well as calling for a clear adaptation work program with clear targets for building the resilience of developing countries and clear financial mechanisms to achieve this. We look forward to the engagements with our international partners and hope that much needed progress will be made in these two key areas. In closing, honourable members, let me reiterate that the government is already working on addressing our country's fragility in the face of climate change, but much more work needs to be done, and such actions can only be done through the broad support of our society and the necessary international support and finances. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. UDM, ATM, good. NFP, the Honourable N. Ganjo.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Please allow me to switch off my video. My network is unstable. Honourable Chairperson, the 55th ANC National Conference acknowledged the climate crisis as a central challenge for South Africa, noting increased risks of droughts and floods across the nation, emphasizing the importance of educating the public about climate change effects. The ANC resolved to garner support for the climate change legislative framework. The resulting bill passed by the ANC-led government prioritizes protecting the poor and vulnerable communities in implementing climate-resilient infrastructure. Education remains crucial for empowering people to comprehend and efficiently respond to climate impacts, and instilling values, particularly in the youth, is vital for embracing necessary changes to preserve the environment. The ANC dismissed unfounded claims that the climate framework won't be effectively implemented. Honourable Chair, the Climate Change Bill proposes an integrated approach across government spheres with a focus on empowering local government, the first responders during crisis. The ANC aligns with international initiatives like the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, emphasizing the need for education, empowerment, and engagement on climate policies. Chair, early warning system actively involving communities are deemed essential, as demonstrated by recent initiatives like the Cleaning and Greening Program. This program addresses environmental degradation, litter reduction, and unemployment, offering 37,049 job opportunities nationwide. Members, establishing emergency management as a tool for climate resilient planning involves various stakeholders. It includes community and religious organizations. The ANC opposes the DA's suggestion to isolate this from local government, emphasizing their crucial role. Honourable Chair, adaptation to climate change includes addressing sea level rise and increased storm surges in many coastal areas, as we have recently witnessed in Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. However, this does not suggest that areas that are not located in coastal areas are immune from climate change. The extreme weather conditions demand collaborative efforts to reduce vulnerability, utilizing technology for the prediction, preparation and prevention of natural disasters. The global investment in adaptation falls short, necessitating private sector involvement. Climate change impacts hinder economic development and exacerbates poverty and living costs. Investing in adaptation is cost-effective for protecting communities, livelihoods, and promoting economic growth. Honorable Chair, the afforestation is lauded as key climate change mitigation strategy, combating extreme weather conditions and reducing carbon in the atmosphere. It revitalizes land and it improves soil quality. It prevents erosions and establishes wild habitats and protects communities from natural disasters. In conclusion, Honorable Chair, the ANC underscores the urgency of addressing climate change through comprehensive legislation, education, and collaborative efforts across sectors, emphasizing the critical role of local governments and private sector investment in building climate resilience. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Gancho. The AIC, COPE, the Honorable Weber.
Thank you, Chairperson. How committed is the ANC government to the implementation of mitigation and adaptation strategies working towards net zero regarding climate change? It is very clear that this government is very confused. They keep on contradicting themselves. For instance, on one side, there is a minister signing the Paris Agreement, making policies and strategies, for example, the low emissions development strategy. And on the other side, a minister saying that he believes that our commitment to climate change and the decommissioning of coal-fired power stations is a reason for load shedding. Outrageous. One of the biggest mitigation strategies to combat the impact of climate change is by reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases from fossil fuel power stations and increasing the share of renewable energies. The Paris Agreement, which South Africa has signed, requires that we ensure that global warming doesn't increase by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. The emissions of greenhouse gases need to be reduced by 45% by 2030. Eskom and Sasol, though, applied to extend the compliance of the minimal emission standards by 2020, and that was approved, and compliance were extended for another 5 years. Not only were Eskom granted another extension this year of being non-compliant to the minimum emissions, but made it clear to our just energy transition partners that they will not be able to reach the minimum emissions as expected, as the cost is too high. Even after Minister Creasy raised the baseline for minimum emissions from 500 to 1,000 milligrams to cubic meters, compliance has still not been reached. Does the government even try? I don't think so. In fact, most Eskom power stations have failed to report on their minimum emissions since February this year. Currently, Kusile Power Station units 1 and 3 are emitting at full scale while bypassing the flue gas desulfurization process. No mitigation, no adaptation, no sight of net zero, a gross violation of our own laws, and yet no consequences. Not the fault of climate change. So the government is continuing to extend deadlines to compliance. The reality and truth is that climate change cannot be put on hold or be extended, and you as government have to stop paying lip service to the climate crisis and put actions into practice. You have to start executing and enforcing climate adaptation and mitigation. Otherwise, we will become one of the countries that SANU, the leader of Greenpeace in Southeast Asia, referred to when he said adaptation is no longer possible for some communities and countries. We have to avoid this at all costs. What is very clear is that this government does not have the ability to maintain infrastructure. It is said that World War III will be fought over water. Water is life. The state of water infrastructure in South Africa is shocking. South Africa is a water-scarce country and cannot afford to lose water due to ill-maintained infrastructure. Most municipalities have failed to maintain their water infrastructure, and the backlog is massive. Water losses are huge due to major leaks and no political will to fix it. Again, climate change is not the culprit here. A small but effective solution is to train EPWP workers as barefoot plumbers to fix water leaks. Until now, the ANC government have not built one single new dam in the country to address the serious water storage need. No vision, no planning. It is concerning to see how many municipalities' raw sewage is run freely into our rivers, dams, and oceans. Sewage causes waterborne diseases, not climate change. This is a total destruction of our water sources. Sewage is filled with nutrients that allow invasive and alien plants to take over our waterways. Again, not climate change. Acid mine drainage and chemical spills into our water happens regularly. These spills do not only kill our biodiversity, but destroy our waterways. One example is the acid mine drainage that spilled into the Wilge and Klein Olifants River in Mpumalanga, where over 3 tons of fish died. The big chemical spill from UPL, where more than 3,000 tons of fish and crustacean have died. Both are due to negligence and not obeying the law, not climate change. Again, I ask the question, where is the execution and enforcement of our laws? Another mitigation strategy is to increase the size of our forests. The greening program is a great initiative. Unfortunately, our nurseries only use a mere 37% of the land available to them. The infrastructure in forestry is totally dilapidated and there is a shortage of water. What is being done by the government to stop deforestation? Climate change is not to blame. If it is on paper, it doesn't mean the work has been done. The law must be enforced. Natural disasters appear all over the world, but in South Africa, we do not have to be afraid of natural disasters, as the biggest threat to our climate and water in this country is the disasters caused by the ANC government, not climate change. The disasters we face in this country are created by the lack of enforcement and compliance of this government. We do not need more research. We need compliance. The solution to climate change is not just a bill on paper, but the execution and enforcement of our laws, saving our water and adherence to the treaties we signed. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next and the last speaker is Honorable Yabo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Chairperson, studies show that South Africa's aquifers hold approximately 235 billion cubic meters of groundwater. However, only 19 billion cubic meters of this volume is renewable and able to be abstracted. To put this into context, the total capacity of our dams is 32 billion cubic meters. What this says to us is that innovative ideas and technological advancements are a necessity moving forward to ensure greater water security. Another fact worth noting is that arguably the biggest aquifer runs under and through the Western Cape, and yet the residents in townships and the Cape Flats experience water shedding regularly, but as always, the DA would rather score cheap political points in a scientific debate. Again, exposing that they are bereft of superior intellect to rise above petty politics. In the city of Tshwane, sewer runs along kilometers of pavement with no budget allocated to address the challenge. And yet here we are, Honorable Weber, speaking very good points that the sewer is the foremost contributor to water contamination. And yet in the city of Tshwane, where they are governing, sewer is the daily bread of the poor and the marginalized. Here we are again, being subjected to a daydreaming session by Honorable Bryant about how Cape Town and the Western Cape are doing well, and yet they are not advancing in accessing advanced water resources under their feet. Addressing the challenges of climate change must never be subjected to party political campaigns, but dealt with through a collective effort by all stakeholders. It is critical that we always remember that climate change-related concerns, such as threats to water security and social infrastructure, are man-made risks. They are a product of our poor collective actions, which threaten not only the existence of humanity, but also the availability of natural resources and sustainability of our biodiversity. Developed countries are responsible for the eroding of the global climate as the main greenhouse gas emitters. But because we are all at the receiving end of natural disasters as a result of climate change, we should all act in concert towards its resolution. While the ANC government is taking care to gradually implement the just transition, while taking the economy of the country into consideration, we are being told today that the ANC is not serious about implementing the just transition. and ensuring that more new renewable sources of energy are implemented by our government. And this is not true. What we are saying is that we will adapt the just transition to the pace that is allowable to our own situation in the country. And yes, as a signatories to the various compacts, we are serious about implementing those compacts. But we still say that we should not be overburdened by developing countries' messes as developing countries ourselves when we are busy moving towards the enactment of the just transition. The risks associated with climate change warrant a swift and robust response with the appropriate skills and resources allocated to interventions to ensure effective responses. South Africa's response to climate change is imperative as the country's economic development is inextricably tied to its natural resources, which include agriculture, mining, and tourism. It is also common knowledge that the development of civilization has always followed adequate water sources. Furthermore, Chair, climate change has negative socio-economic effects which magnifies the country's heightened triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The risk of not responding to climate change also poses extensive health risks which may further burden a constrained healthcare system. Health is one of the fundamental cornerstones of any nation, and its jeopardy threatens the prosperity and stability of the country. As floods are predicted to become more frequent and severe as climate change worsens, posing an immediate threat to people's lives and homes, it is imperative that we address human settlements in floodplains. This is because despite being, by definition, high-rich zones for floods, floodplains are frequently well inhabited. Large groups of people live in these areas despite the risks for multiple reasons, including poverty. These people and their informal settlements therefore become especially vulnerable to the destructive impacts of floods because they frequently lack proper drainage systems and other critical infrastructure to withstand the impact of natural disasters. Chair, additionally, there are major economic ramifications when people settle near flood zones, as flooding may result in significant damage to infrastructure and property, which raises the cost of recovery and reconstruction. The cost of reacting to and recovering from floods strains our government as we are already grappling with high levels of unemployment and inflation. Therefore, as we conclude this debate, I urge each and every one of us from all corners and sectors of society to share in Utata Nelson Mandela's vision and to translate the sentiments he expressed in our daily lives. And I quote, "Dream of our vast desert, of our forests, of all our great wildernesses, and never forget that it is our duty to protect this environment." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Yabo. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini-plenary session. The mini-plenary will now rise.
Malibongwe.